Hey folks, welcome back to day number 8 of the Bible in 365. Today we're taking a look at Genesis chapter 24 starting in verse 38 and going all the way to Genesis chapter 26 ending in verse 35, which just happens to be the end of the chapter. Anyways, folks, we've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. All right, so picking up where we left off yesterday, if you guys remember in this story, it's the story of Isaac and Rebekah. At this point in time, Abraham realizes that it's time for his son to get married. So he sends off one of his servants back to his home country to find Isaac a wife. Isaac prays to the Lord and says, "Hey God, here's a couple of things. If a woman comes out to the well and gets water for me and my camels, let that be the wife that you want for Isaac." And so shortly thereafter, Rebekah comes out, offers the servant water, and then waters the camels as well. The servant asks if he could stay the night, and that's where the story picks up today. Rebekah obliges, welcomes him into the house, and the servant recounts this entire story of how he was sent by Abraham to find Isaac a wife, and he tells the story to Laban, which is the brother of Rebekah. And at that point in time, both the brother of Rebekah and the father of Rebekah say, "Hey, this is obviously in the will of God, and there's nothing we can say one way or another, so yeah, go ahead, take Rebekah back with you to be Isaac's wife." So at the end of the chapter, we see that Isaac is out meditating. He sees the camels coming. And at that point in time, he meets Rebekah and brings Rebekah into his mother's tent and marries her there. Now, moving forward to chapter 25, chapter 25 deals almost entirely with genealogies. It begins with letting us know that after the death of Sarah, Abraham takes another wife whose name was Keturah. And then it tells us about the children that Abraham and Keturah had together. In verses 12 through 18 of the chapter, it tells us of Ishmael and of his descendants. And then starting in verse 19, it tells us the family line of Abraham going to the covenant son Isaac, who marries Rebekah, and then tells us about their children. Now, one thing that's very important in this story, it says that Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, and that he prayed for children because Rebekah was without children. She was childless. And so this kind of makes us as the reader think about how Sarah was barren, and Sarah couldn't have kids. And it makes us go, whoa, 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 this is a little strange. Didn't God say that the line was supposed to go through Isaac for Sarah couldn't have kids? They finally have Isaac, but now like Isaac's wife Rebekah can't have kids. And so it gets the reader a little bit nervous, but then it does tell us that Rebekah became pregnant and gave birth to 2 sons, to Esau and Jacob. And it does tell us that the older would serve the younger, so Esau would serve Jacob. Now here in the story, it also tells us a little bit about that infamous story of how Esau sells his birthright, being firstborn, to Jacob for a bowl of stew, a bowl of soup. And how essentially Esau came to resent or to despise his birthright because of that. Now, moving forward to chapter 26. Chapter 26 is really interesting because it parallels some of Genesis chapter 12 and Genesis chapter 20. At the beginning of Genesis chapter 26, we see that there is a famine in the land. This is what happened at the beginning of Genesis chapter 12 when Abraham experiences a famine, so he goes to Egypt. So we start thinking of those events. Now, the difference here is that the Lord tells Isaac to stay in the land. If you remember, Isaac needs to stay in the land. The land is promised to him by the Lord. So it's very, very critical and important that Isaac stays in this land and doesn't leave. So he stays in the land of Gerar. And at that point in time, it says the men of the place asked him about his wife. And Isaac said, "She is my sister," because he was afraid to say, "She is my wife," because he thought that the men might kill him because Rebekah was beautiful. Wait. Hold up. Isn't this similar to what happened to Abraham in Egypt in Genesis chapter 12, but then again in Genesis chapter 20 with Abimelech? Why is there this parallel? Why is Isaac repeating the same mistakes as his father? Kind of makes us think as the reader. So we continue on in the story, and we see that Isaac had been there for a long time. And one day, the king, Abimelech, sees that Isaac is caressing his wife, Rebekah. And he's like, whoa. She's not your sister. She's your wife. Why did you lie to us? Your father lied to me. What's up with you guys? Like, really? Like, imagine if one of my men had slept with her, all the guilt and the shame and the cursing of the Lord that you would have brought upon us? Like, are you crazy? So Abimelech sends out this command for no one to touch or sleep with the wife of Isaac, with Rebekah. It's the same thing that he did on behalf of Abraham. And so now Abimelech and Isaac are kind of cool. And so Isaac stays there in the land, and just like Abraham, he grows really, really wealthy and starts doing really well. And this part of scripture I like to call the growing pains, because as you grow in wealth and in number, the people around you start getting jealous. And partially it was an agrarian society, so the community couldn't handle people with that much wealth or power in community, so they needed to spread out. And Abimelech says to Isaac, he says, "You have become too powerful, so please move away." So Isaac moves away, and there's a dispute about wells. Hold on. Isn't that what happened in Genesis 20? There was a dispute between Abimelech and Abraham about a well, and now there's a dispute about a well between Isaac and Abimelech. There's a lot of similarities. And so they work that out through some negotiations, and everything's fine. In fact, at that point in time, Abimelech says, "Hey, let's make a treaty." And so Abimelech and Isaac made a treaty, just like Abraham and Abimelech made a treaty. And so they throw a feast, and all is good between them. Now, at that point in time, the chapter ends just by telling us that Isaac redigs the wells that were originally dug by his father Abraham. And it looks like more prosperity is coming to Isaac, but it also confirms that Isaac is following in the footsteps of his father Abraham. All right, folks, that's all I have for you tonight. So tomorrow we're going to move on to day number 9 of the Bible in 365 series, and tomorrow's reading is pretty simple. It's Genesis chapter 27 through Genesis chapter 29. Once again, folks, that is Genesis chapter 27 to Genesis chapter 29. Anyways, I look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow. Until then, good evening and God bless.